Hey there, let's talk dungeons. Dungeons right now are in full swing, and there's a lot to talk about here. What I most want to focus on this video is just the difficulty of the dungeons, what's being done right, and what's being done horribly wrong. Why do I want to talk difficulty? Because difficulty of the dungeons is the core problem of what's currently off with dungeons. If you ask the new players playing dungeons for the first or second time, they'll likely say that they're having a blast and everything is fine. Ask veteran players about it, they'll likely reply that it's stale, while spamming dungeons with their favorite captain, hoping to get all the legendary scrolls and as many fairy scrolls as possible before the event ends. Now eventually those bright-eyed new players will become veterans, and they'll join the camp of every dungeons feeling like the previous dungeons. The successful captains will downscale themselves as much as humanly possible, flag bearer spam the first 15 dungeon levels, and then bulldoze it until they hit one of the 3 roadblock maps in this dungeon rotation, and they repeat the process, printing keys. Not only that, but the boons offered to us these last few go-arounds have been pretty bad. Don't get me wrong, some of these boons are very fun to play with. I made a boon tier list and a dungeon guide on my website that goes over how to win at dungeons and what boons are worth it. And the boons that are worth it are an absolute joy to use. Once or twice. Eventually you realize that the majority of the boons are dead picks, and the majority of the units that aren't melee or ranged are borderline useless except for extremely niche situations. This is because melee and ranged boons have ridiculous amounts of synergy, and tank, assassin, and supports barely have anything going for them. Did you know that enemy units also have boons? I forgot they even get boons up until halfway through my second level 200 dungeon run. This is because the boons that enemies get are laughable. And out of the 32, and let me emphasize this, they have 32 boons that enemies get. Only one of them is a threat. And that's also in the guide, wink wink. One part of the problem of the difficulty of dungeons is exactly where the difficulty even comes from. The difficulty of dungeons come from 2 places. The ramping up of the scaling, which I've mentioned before gets completely undone by spamming nothing but flag bearers for the first 15 rooms, and the map difficulties themselves. There's very many maps where all I have to do is lay out, place any unit markers, and then there's maps where I have to obsessively beg my stream to put down units in hyper-specific ways, which make or break the run because the maps themselves are stupidly hard. As I mentioned before, there's 3 maps that trip up most people, and it's because they demand specific boons in order to beat them at a regular scale. The difficulties of the dungeon should not come from these 2 places. Scaling should exist to a certain extent, and so should map diversity with weaker and stronger maps, but the difficulty of the dungeon should come from the enemy boons. You should be picking up your boons with a smile, but also dreading thinking about what kind of nonsense the enemies have gotten. My ideal dungeon run, if I were to control the difficulty of the dungeons, would look like this. Floors 1 through 9 are gimmies, where as long as you are placing any unit that looks okay, you're more than likely to win. And they award the same amount of keys as they do right now, going from 2 up to 10. Floors 10 and 21 should be moderately difficult, where apt and smart usage of units are required to win. Basically, I don't want these floors to be gimmies, but at the same time you can't do them with your brain turned off. At around this point is where you should be reading the enemy boons and figuring out what's the best way to tackle this map under these situations. That's what makes the game fun, planning and then seeing your plan succeed or fail horribly. From 22 until 30, the difficulty should be at a point where player boons are needed to have been picked smartly and with a little bit of luck, as well as smart usage of units to get there. I didn't mention, but floors 10 through 30, the key reward should stay at 10 so that it largely remains the same. And then from maps 31 onwards, every map should be increasingly impossible to the point of hilarity. At map 31, enemies should be getting their first epic boons, and the epic boons should be run-endingly unfair. As an example of what I mean by run-ending, I mean all armored units transform into a random boss of the same level. All units on death spawns enemy busters with 5 movement speed. All melee units are invincible, gain 5 speed, and attacks do extra AoE damage for the first 20 seconds of battle. All support units on death do a map-wide AoE heal of 9999 to all of their allies. Assassin units all teleport to the nearest support units on battle start, and gain 2 seconds of invisibility on kill. Ranged units' first attack kills whatever it hits. Spawns the Hook's Guardian on the enemy side of the field. Okay, the last one was a little self-indulgent, but that boss was the best boss in the game ever implemented, no cap. Any one of the boons that I just mentioned would make a captain sweat. But now imagine dungeon level 34, where you have to deal with 2 of those boons at once. Dungeon level 37, where you have to deal with a combination of 3 of those boons at once. Each map would be exciting and nerve-wracking because the captain would be scoping out all of the boons on top of these unfair boons, how many of the map's enemies even have these enemy types, and how to best counter each of the boons. Basically, it's not brain dead. You don't just start the battle without checking what's even going on, because that's how it is right now. Right now, I can just turn my brain off, put down all range markers, and win 99% of the time. As such, progressing this far in this new idea should come with extra reward, because it offsets the current 10 key spam we have going right now. Players who have been a captain with at least 20 battles in the overall dungeon run, starting at dungeon level 31, will gain an extra key, and that goes up to a cap of 20 keys per win, assuming that anyone can actually get to that point. The goal of this should be to reward players sticking to a certain captain, and it should be fun, and there should be big incentive to go as far as humanly possible, while burning all of your units. More on that in another video. That said, our boons should also get some upgrades, where every boon we have access to should be an amazing boon or a godly boon, instead of wading through a mire of bad and useless boons in search of the 3 godly boons that'll make the dungeon run into an endless run that we currently have right now in Dungeons 11. What I'm saying is that I want boons to be much stronger, much better to counter enemy boons, but it still requires us to think, use our units wisely and not burn them and have them die. Basically, I want to promote smarter play and dungeons to be even more of a game mode and not just campaign battles every 5 minutes. I honestly don't mind if Dungeons 12 is more of the same that we have from Dungeons 11, so long as Dungeons 13 is being worked on with some of these suggestions in mind. There are so many good ideas to implement into dungeons that would make it an extremely fun, unique experience that demands us to play it rather than playing it purely for the reward on both the captain's side and the raider side. I personally have a myriad of ideas to make dungeons feel fresh every single time, but, as I said before, the biggest of these is the difficulty, and so long as this gets addressed, it'll be a great start to making Stream Raiders Dungeons the streamer game that people look forward to. As always, like, comment below, check out my new guide site, where I'm slowly making guides to uncover the mysteries of Stream Raiders and Stream Pirates, and if you want me to make a video on anything specific, leave it in the comments below and I'll see what I can do. Thanks for watching, friends. Take care.